Dear listener, welcome to a tale woven from the shadows of New York's concrete jungle, where secrets lurk in places even the streetlights can't touch. Picture it, 1940s Manhattan, a city of sharp suits, sharper tongues, and mysteries that cling to the air like cigarette smoke in Archie Goodwin, right-hand man to Nero Wolfe, the greatest detective this side of the Atlantic, maybe both sides, if you ask him tonight, in pulling you into a case that's got it all. A dead detective, a hidden tunnel, and enough lies to choke a jury, so settle in, grab a drink, and let's unravel this puzzle together. Chapter 1. The Brownstone Beckons. The evening of October 12th, 1945, started like most others in Nero Wolfe's brownstone, me, sprawled in the office with my feet on the desk, a pulp magazine open to a half-read story about a dame with a gun and a grudge. The clock on the wall ticked towards 7, and the aroma of Fritz Brenner's lamb roast drifted from the kitchen, promising a dinner that'd make a saint weep. Wolfe was upstairs in the plant rooms, fussing over his orchids like they were his children. 10,000 of them, each more pampered than the last, me. I was content with my magazine and the prospect of a quiet night. Then the doorbell jangled, sharp and insistent, like a fire alarm in a library. Fritz was elbow deep in rosemary and garlic, so I sighed, tossed the magazine aside and hauled myself to the front door. The peephole revealed a woman standing on the stoop, her silhouette framed by the glow of a street lamp. She wore a mink coat that screamed money, but her posture, shoulders hunched, hands clutching a handbag like a lifeline, said trouble, big trouble. I opened the door, letting in a gust of autumn air that carried the faint tang of coal smoke and city grit. "Evening," I said, tipping my hat just enough to be polite. "What brings you to Nero Wolfe's doorstep?" Her eyes, dark and stormy as a November sky, met mine. "I need to see Mr. Wolfe," she said, her voice low but steady, like she'd rehearsed the words 100 times. "It's urgent. My name is Eleanor Vance," pronounced Vance. I raised an eyebrow. Urgent cases were Wolfe's bread and butter, but he didn't take kindly to unannounced visitors, especially after 6 p.m. Still, something about her, the way her gloved fingers trembled, the flicker of fear behind her composure, told me this wasn't a social call. "Come in, Miss Vance," I said, stepping aside. "Let's see if the great man's in a mood to listen." I led her down the hall to the office, a room that always felt like the heart of the brownstone 2 walls were lined with bookshelves, stuffed with everything from Shakespeare to treatises on criminology. Wolfe's massive desk dominated the space, carved from cherrywood and polished to a gleam. Behind it sat his custom chair, built to hold his 300 pounds without a creak. A yellow leather armchair waited for clients, flanked by a globe and a rack of Wolfe's favourite beers, currently a half-dozen bottles of Remmers, chilled and ready. The air smelled of old leather, ink, and the faint sweetness of Wolfe's orchids drifting down from the roof. "Take a seat," I said, pointing to the yellow chair. "I'll fetch. Mr. Wolfe is probably arguing with a cattleyar about its blooming schedule." She gave a tight smile, barely a twitch, and sat, still clutching that handbag. I climbed the stairs to the plant rooms where Wolfe was inspecting a row of orchids under glass. He wore a yellow smock over his vest and tie. His massive frame bent slightly as he peered at a flower with the intensity of a jeweller appraising a diamond Archie. He said, without looking up, his voice a deep rumble that could shake the walls, "If this is about dinner, tell Fritz will be down in 20 minutes. "No dinner talk, boss," I said. "We've got a visitor. A lady, name of Eleanor Vance, says it's urgent, and she's got the look of someone with a real problem." Wolfe grunted, a sound that could mean anything from mild annoyance to grudging interest. He set down his watering can, removed the smock and adjusted his tie, a ritual that meant he was at least considering the interruption. "Very well," he said. "Show her in. But if this is another marital squabble, I shall be most displeased." Back in the office, Eleanor Vance hadn't moved, her posture as rigid as a statue's. Wolfe entered, filling the doorway like a mountain in a suit, and settled into his chair with a sigh that suggested the world's weight rested on his shoulders. He laced his fingers over his stomach, fixed his eyes on her and said, "Miss Vance, you have my attention. State your case." "Precisely." She took a deep breath, as if steeling herself, and began, "Mr. Wolfe, my brother, Leonard Vance, is dead." He was a private detective, one of the best. This morning, the police found him in a storage room beneath Grand Central Station, stabbed through the chest. They're calling it a robbery, but I know better. Leonard was working on something dangerous, something big. He told me he'd found a secret tunnel under the city, tied to people with power. He was scared. Mr. Wolfe. I've never seen him scared before. I leaned against the desk, my interest piqued. A dead detective. That wasn't just a case. It was personal Wolfe's world revolved around outsmarting criminals, and a murdered PI was a direct challenge to his domain. I glanced at him, expecting a frown, but his face was unreadable, his eyes half closed like a cat sizing up a mouse. "Miss Vance," Wolfe said, his voice smooth as velvet. "Describe this tunnel." Omit no detail, however trivial. She hesitated, her fingers tightening on the handbag. Leonard didn't tell me much. He was secretive, even with me. But a week ago, over dinner, he mentioned finding old subway blueprints, maps of tunnels that aren't supposed to exist. He said one ran under Grand Central, sealed off since the 1920s, but he thought it was being used again. For what, he wouldn't say. Just that it involved people you don't cross. Those were his words. Wolfe's lips twitched, a rare sign of intrigue and the police. "Report?" he asked. "They found a notebook in his pocket," she said. "Just names and some sketches. Nothing clear. They won't let me see it. Inspector Kramer's handling the case, but he's brushing me off. Says it's open and shut. But Leonard wasn't robbed. His wallet, his watch, they were still on him. This was murder, Mr. Wolfe, and I need you to find out why I jotted down Kramer's name in my notebook, already planning a call to the inspector. He and Wolfe had a love-hate relationship, mostly hate, but he'd cough up the report if I leaned on him hard enough. Wolfe leaned back, the chair creaking under his bulk. "Miss Vance," he said, "your brother's profession suggests enemies. Did he mention specific threats, names, associates?" She shook her head, her eyes glistening but dry. He was careful. Too careful, maybe. But he did mention 3 people he was investigating. Vincent Harlow, who owns a nightclub called the Blue Orchid, pronounced Harlow Margaret Klein, a librarian who helped him with research pronounced Klein, and Dr. Samuel Trent, a professor who knows about the city's old tunnels pronounced Trent. That's all I know. Please, Mr. Wolfe, will you take the case? Wolfe didn't answer immediately. He reached for a bottle of Remmers, poured a glass with the precision of a chemist, and took a sip, savouring it like it held the secrets of the universe. I knew that look. He was already turning the puzzle over in his mind, weighing the pieces: a dead detective, a hidden tunnel, and a trio of names. It was the kind of case that could keep him up past his usual bedtime Archie, he said at last. Call Inspector Kramer. Obtain the police report and that notebook, Miss Vance. Remain in the city. Do not return to your apartment until I instruct you. You may be in danger. Eleanor's eyes widened, but she nodded. I escorted her to the door, promising to call with updates. As she stepped into the night, her mink coat swallowed by the shadows, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was holding something back. A sister's grief. Or something more. Back in the office, I dialed Kramer's number. Already bracing for his growl, Wolfe was staring at the globe, his fingers tapping a rhythm only he understood. "Archie," he said, "this tunnel intrigues me. A passage hidden beneath the city, used for nefarious purposes. We shall uncover its secrets." Chapter 2. A Detective's Demise. The office in Nero Wolfe's brownstone on West 35th Street was quiet after Eleanor Vance left, the kind of quiet that feels like the city's holding its breath. It was just past 7:30, October 12, 1945, and the air carried the faint tang of Fritz's lamb roast, cooling in the kitchen, mingling with the leather and ink smell of the room. Wolfe sat behind his cherrywood desk, all 300 pounds of him, sipping a bottle of Remmers beer with the reverence of a monk at prayer. His eyes, half closed, were fixed on the globe in the corner, but I knew his mind was already turning over Eleanor's story, like a jeweller inspecting a flawed diamond. A dead detective, a hidden tunnel, and 3 names. Vincent Harlow, Margaret Klein, and Dr. Samuel Trent. My job was to get the ball rolling, and that meant dealing with the one man in New York who'd sooner chew glass than help us, Inspector Kramer of the NYPD. I reached for the phone on my desk, a sleek black rotary that felt like an old friend, and dialed homicide. The line crackled, and a gruff voice answered Kramer. It barked, like the man was already annoyed with me. "Evening, Inspector," I said, keeping my tone light. "Archie Goodwin here, calling from Nero Wolfe's office. Got a minute for an old pal?" "Pal, my foot," Kramer growled, and I could picture his red face and unlit cigar, probably clenched between his teeth. "What's Wolfe want now? I'm up to my neck in cases." "Goodwin?" "It's about Leonard Vance," I said, dropping the name like a stone in a pond. "Found dead under Grand Central this morning. His sister says it's no robbery. Wolfe's interested and he wants the police report. Oh, and that notebook you found on Vance, can you send it over?" Kramer's silence was louder than a subway train. "Finally," he said, "Vance was a good man. Stabbed, no weapon, no witnesses. We're calling it a botched hold-up." "What's Wolfe's angle?" "Angle?" I said, feigning innocence. "Just doing a favour for a grieving sister." "Come on, Kramer, you owe me one after that. Brooklyn warehouse case." He muttered something unprintable, then sighed. "Fine. He'll be there in an hour, but if Wolfe's fishing for headlines, he'll have his hide." The line went dead. I hung up, glancing at Wolfe. He was still staring at the globe, his fingers tapping a slow rhythm on the desk. "Kramer's coming," I said. "Sounds like he's got nothing but a body and a hunch. You want me to start sniffing around those names Eleanor gave us?" "Not yet, Archie," Wolfe said, his voice a low rumble, like thunder over the Hudson. "First, the facts. The police report will tell us what they missed. Then, you will pursue Mr. Harlow, Miss Klein, and Dr. Trent. Discreetly." I grinned. Discreet's not my strong suit, but I'd manage. I pulled out my notebook and jotted down the names again. Vincent Harlow, nightclub owner. Margaret Klein, K-line, librarian. Dr. Samuel Trent, professor. Each one sounded like a piece of the puzzle, but whether they were suspects, witnesses, or something else, I couldn't say. Not yet. Kramer arrived at 8:15, his overcoat damp from a drizzle that had started outside. He looked like he'd aged a year since I last saw him, his jowls heavier, his eyes bloodshot. He tossed a manila folder onto Wolfe's desk with the enthusiasm of a man serving bad fish. "There's your report," he said, sinking into the yellow leather chair, "and the notebook's in evidence, so don't ask what's this about, Wolfe. Vance was a pro. If he got himself killed, he stepped on the wrong toes." Wolfe opened the folder, his thick fingers surprisingly delicate as he scanned the pages. I leaned over his shoulder, catching glimpses. Leonard Vance, 38, private investigator, found at 6:17 a.m. in a storage room beneath Grand Central Station. Single stab wound to the chest, no defensive marks. Wallet intact, $2,350 in cash, gold watch still ticking. A notebook in his coat pocket containing names, sketches, and what the report called incoherent notes about tunnels. No fingerprints, no murder weapon. The storage room was locked. "Key missing, Pfui," Wolfe muttered, a sound reserved for when the world disappointed him. "Inspector, this report is inadequate." No mention of the tunnel's access points, no analysis of the notebook's contents. "Did your men even search the storage room?" Kramer's face went from red to purple. "We searched it, Wolfe. It's a dead end. Literally just crates and dust. If you've got something to say, spit it out." Wolfe leaned back, the chair creaking under his weight. Mr. Vance was investigating a hidden passage, as his sister informed us a tunnel, sealed since the 1920s, possibly reopened for illicit purposes. "Your botched robbery is a fiction, Inspector." This was murder, calculated and precise. Kramer chewed his cigar, unlit as always. "Tunnels? That's fairy tale stuff. Vance was probably chasing ghosts, got jumped by some vagrant. You got evidence, Wolfe, or just hot air?" "Evidence will come," Wolfe said, his tone final. "Archie, copy the relevant details from this report, Inspector. I suggest you revisit that storage room. Look for a concealed entrance." You may be surprised Kramer stood, snatching his hat. "I'll send you a copy of the notebook pages tomorrow, but don't expect miracles. And Goodwin, stay out of my men's way." He stormed out, leaving a trail of cigar scent and bad temper. I spent the next half hour transcribing the report, my typewriter clacking like a machine gun. The details were thin, but one thing stood out. The storage room was near an old subway maintenance shaft, abandoned since the city expanded the tunnels in 1930. If Vance was right about a secret passage, it might connect to that shaft I showed Wolfe my notes, and his eyes gleamed. A rare sign he was hooked. "Archie," he said, pouring another beer, "Miss Vance's story suggests a conspiracy. A detective does not die by chance in a locked room under Grand Central tomorrow. You will visit Mr. Harlowe's nightclub, the Blue Orchid Gage's character. Then find Miss Klein at the library and Dr. Trent at his university. Bring me their secrets." I nodded, already mapping my day. Harlowe's club was on the Lower East Side, a place where the air was thick with smoke and secrets. Klein worked at the New York Public Library. Surrounded by books that might hold clues to those blueprints, Trent at Columbia was probably buried in dusty tomes about the city's underbelly. Each one was a thread, and it'd tug until something unravelled. Before I turned in, I checked the office window. Peering into the drizzle-soaked street, West 35th was quiet, but a figure lingered under a street lamp, collar up, face hidden by a fedora. Watching the brownstone, or just a late-night smoker? I filed it away, my gut telling me this case was about to get messier. Wolfe was still at his desk, flipping through the report again, his lips pursed. "Archie," he said without looking up, "this tunnel is no mere curiosity. It is the artery of the crime. Find its purpose, and we find the killer." Chapter 3. The investigation begins. It was 9 a.m. on October 13th, 1945, and the brownstone on West 35th Street was humming with the kind of energy you get when a case starts to crackle. Fritz Brenner was in the kitchen, clanging pots as he prepped breakfast. Bacon, eggs, and pancakes that could make a grown man cry. Upstairs, Nero Wolfe was in the plant rooms, fussing over his orchids like they were royalty me. I was in the office, hunched over my desk, poring over the notes I'd typed from Inspector Kramer's police report. Leonard Vance, 38, private investigator, found at 6:17 a.m. in a storage room under Grand Central. A single stab wound to the chest, no defensive marks, wallet and watch untouched. A notebook in his pocket held 3 names: Vincent Harlowe, Charlow, Margaret Klein, Dr. Samuel Trent, and cryptic sketches of what looked like tunnel maps. The report called it a robbery gone wrong, but Wolfe wasn't buying it, and neither was I. A locked room, a dead detective, and a secret tunnel. That's no stick-up, that's murder with a purpose. I leaned back in my chair, the faint scent of Fritz coffee drifting in, and glanced at the phone. Kramer had promised to send copies of Vance's notebook pages today, but I wasn't holding my breath. The NYPD moved slower than a taxi in rush hour when it came to sharing with Wolfe. Still, Wolfe's orders were clear. Start with the suspects. Vincent Harlowe ran the Blue Orchid, a nightclub on the Lower East Side that probably saw more shady deals than a backroom poker game. Margaret Klein worked at the New York Public Library, digging up old maps that might point to Vance's tunnel. Dr. Samuel Trent, a Columbia professor, was obsessed with the city's underground history. 3 threads, all tangled, and my job was to tug until something snapped. I grabbed my hat, a grey fedora that looked sharp enough to cut glass, and checked my notebook. First stop, the library. Klein was the closest, and Wolfe wanted those blueprints Vance had been chasing. I slipped on my overcoat, the wool heavy against the October chill, and stepped into the office to report to Wolfe before heading out. He was back from the plant room, settled behind his cherrywood desk, a fresh bottle of Remmer's beer in hand, its amber glow catching the light from the desk lamp. The office smelled of old books, leather, and the faint sweetness of orchids that clung to Wolfe's suit. "Boss," I said, leaning against the doorframe, "I'm off to see Margaret Klein at the library." "Want me to ask her anything specific, or just charm her into spilling her guts?" Wolfe's lips twitched. "A rare hint of amusement, Archie," he rumbled, his voice like a cello tuned low. "Inquire about the blueprints Mr. Vance requested. Ascertain her involvement. Was she merely a source, or something more? And do try to avoid your usual flamboyance." I grinned. "Flamboyance is my middle name. Anything else?" He sipped his beer, eyes half closed. "The tunnel, Archie. Its purpose is the key. If Miss Klein knows of its use, past or present, she may hold the thread that unravels this knot." The New York Public Library was a 20-minute cab ride from the brownstone, through streets slick with morning drizzle. The city was alive. Newsstands hawking papers, cabbies cursing, dames in fur coats dodging puddles. I paid the driver $1 and stepped onto Fifth Avenue, The library's stone lions glaring down like they knew something I didn't. Inside, the air was cool and smelled of dust and polished wood. I navigated the marble halls to the map division, where Margaret Klein worked. According to Eleanor Vance, I found her behind a counter, a mousy woman in her 30s, glasses slipping down her nose, her brown hair pinned up like a schoolteacher's. She was sorting a stack of maps, her fingers moving with the precision of a surgeon. "Miss Klein," I said, tipping my hat. "Archie Goodwin, working for Nero Wolfe." "Got a minute to talk about Leonard Vance?" Her hands froze and her eyes, sharp as a hawk's despite the glasses, darted to mine. "Mr. Vance," she said, her voice soft but steady, I heard he passed a terrible thing. How can I help?" I leaned on the counter, keeping my tone easy. Vance was looking into some old subway blueprints. "His sister says you helped him. Mind telling me what he was after?" She hesitated, glancing around like the books might be eavesdropping. "He came in 2 weeks ago," she said. "Wanted maps from the 1910s. Showing subway construction around Grand Central, I found him a blueprint of an old maintenance tunnel. Sealed off in 1922. He was excited. Said it might be active again." "Active?" I raised an eyebrow. "As in trains? Or something less legal?" She flushed, pushing her glasses up. "He didn't say, just that it was important. I gave him the blueprint and a few articles on the city's abandoned tunnels. He seemed nervous. Kept looking over his shoulder. I jotted that down. Nervous was a good word. It matched Eleanor's story. Did he mention anyone else? Vincent Harlow, maybe? Or Dr. Samuel Trent?" Her eyes widened, just a flicker, but I caught it. "No," she said, too quickly. "He worked alone. I barely knew him." She turned back to her maps, her hands trembling now I didn't push. Yet instead, I asked to see the blueprint. She led me to a reading room, pulling a yellowed map from a drawer. It showed Grand Central's underbelly, with a dotted line labelled Maintenance Shaft B7. Decommissioned 1922. The tunnel snaked beneath the station, connecting to a storage area, likely where Vance died. I made a quick sketch in my notebook, thanked her, and left, but not before noticing a slip of paper tucked under her desk blotter, marked with a scrawled VH Vincent Harlow, or a red herring. Back at the brownstone, I showed Wolfe the sketch and recounted Klein's story. He was in the office, a fresh beer in hand, his massive frame filling the custom chair. "Interesting," he murmured, studying the sketch like it was a rare manuscript. "This tunnel, Archie, is no relic. If Mr. Vance believed it was in use, we must discover why smuggling, espionage, or something more? Pedestrian?" I shrugged Klein's, hiding something that VH note could point to Harlow. "Want me to hit his nightclub next?" Wolfe nodded. "Yes, but first, Dr. Trent. His knowledge of the city's underground may illuminate this labyrinth, and Archie, watch for that figure you saw last night. If they are following you, they know we're involved." I hadn't forgotten the fedora-clad watcher from the night before. Was it Harlow, keeping tabs? Klein, scared enough to stalk us? Or someone else entirely? My gut said trouble was close, and I wasn't about to let it sneak up on me. Chapter 4. The Nightclub Lead. It was just past 8 p.m. on October 13, 1945, and the Lower East Side was alive with the pulse of the night. The drizzle from the morning had stopped, leaving the streets slick and reflecting the glow of neon signs like spilled paint. I'd left the brownstone after reporting to Nero Wolfe about my library visit with Margaret Klein, her nervous twitch, the 1910 blueprint of a sealed tunnel under Grand Central, and that cryptic VH note under her blotter. Wolfe, parked behind his desk with a bottle of Remmer's beer, had grunted, a sound that meant he was thinking hard, and told me to hit the Blue Orchid next, home turf of Vincent Harlow, one of Leonard Vance's 3 mystery names. If VH stood for Harlow, I was about to walk into a snake pit. I caught a cab to Essex Street, where the club sat wedged between a pawnshop and a diner that smelled of burnt coffee. The Blue Orchid sign flickered in red and blue, promising glamour but delivering grit. I adjusted my fedora, smoothed my tie, a navy number that matched my suit, and pushed through the door. The air hit me like a fist. Cigarette smoke, cheap perfume, and the tang of whiskey, all undercut by the throb of a jazz quartet sweating through a rendition of Mood Indigo. The place was packed. Dames in sequined dresses, guys in sharp suits, and a few types who looked like they'd sell their mothers for a fin. I scanned the room, spotting a bar along one wall, a small dance floor, and a stage where a singer in a red gown was crooning about heartbreak. Behind the bar, a guy with a pencil moustache and slicked back hair was pouring drinks with the ease of a card shark dealing aces that had to be Vincent Harlow pronounced Harlow, the nightclub owner Eleanor Vance had named. He was maybe 40, lean as a greyhound, with eyes that didn't smile even when his mouth did I made my way over, dodging a drunk who tried to sell me a genuine Rolex for $2. "Evening," I said, leaning on the bar. "You Harlow? I'm Archie Goodwin, working for Nero Wolfe. Got a minute to talk about Leonard Vance?" Harlow's grin froze just for a split second before he slid a whiskey my way. Unasked for, which made me suspicious. "Vance," he said, his voice smooth as the liquor. "Sure. I knew him, private dick, always poking around. What's this about, Goodwin? He owe Wolfe money?" He laughed, but it didn't reach those cold eyes. I sipped the whiskey. Decent, not great, and kept my tone casual. "Vance is dead. Found stabbed under Grand Central yesterday. His sister says he was asking you about tunnels. Old ones, maybe under this club, ring any bells." Harlow's hand paused on a bottle, and I caught a flicker of something, fear, guilt, before he covered it with a shrug. "Tunnels? That's crazy talk. Vance came by a few weeks ago, sure, asking about Prohibition days. Thought some old bootlegger routes might run under here. I told him this place was built in 35, nothing but dirt and pipes below. He was chasing ghosts, Goodwin." I nodded, like I bought it, but my gut said Harlow was lying faster than a politician at a rally. "Mind if I take a look around?" I asked, just to be thorough. His grin tightened. "Private property, pal. Unless you've got a warrant, you're welcome to drink, dance, or leave." He gestured to the crowd where a couple was swaying too close for decency. Enjoy the show. I wasn't done, but pushing him now would get me nowhere. I finished the whiskey, left $1 on the bar, and wandered toward the back, pretending to look for the John. The club was a maze of dim corners, and near a stack of crates by the rear exit, I spotted something, a trap door, half hidden under a rug, its edges scuffed like it'd been used recently. A tunnel entrance? Or just a liquor stash? I filed it away, knowing it'd need more than a hunch to crack Harlow open. Back at the brownstone, it was pushing 10 p.m. Wolfe was in the office, a fresh beer in hand, his massive frame dwarfing the desk. The room smelled of leather, ink, and the faint orchid scent that followed him. Everywhere I dropped into my chair and gave him the rundown. Harlow's slick denial, the trap door, and that flicker in his eyes when I mentioned tunnels. "Interesting," Wolfe said, his fingers laced over his stomach. "Mr. Harlow's evasiveness suggests knowledge. The trapdoor may be significant, but we need more. Tomorrow, Archie, visit Dr. Trent. His expertise may illuminate this passage." I nodded, but my mind was still on that trapdoor. "Boss, you think Harlow's running something through that tunnel? Booze? Cash? Or something bigger?" Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Possibly Mr. Vance's death was no accident. The tunnel is the key. Its purpose will lead us to the killer. And Archie, be cautious. That figure you saw last night may be watching still. He was right. As it left the Blue Orchid, it caught a glimpse of a shadow across the street. Same fedora, same hunched posture as the night before. Whoever it was, they were tailing me, and I didn't like it one bit. Was it Harlow, covering his tracks? Klein, scared enough to play spy? Or a new player we hadn't met yet? I checked my watch. 10:15. Too late to chase Trent tonight, but I made a mental note to hit Columbia University first thing. Tomorrow, for now, I needed sleep, but not before checking the brownstone's locks. That watcher was out there, and I wasn't about to let them catch me napping. Chapter 5. The Librarian's Secret. It was 10 a.m. on October 14th, 1945, and the New York Public Library loomed over Fifth Avenue like a stone fortress guarding the city's secrets. The morning sun cut through the haze, glinting off the wet pavement, but the chill in the air kept my overcoat buttoned tight. I'd spent the night tossing, my mind stuck on Vincent Harlow's slick lies and that trapdoor at the Blue Orchid. The shadowy figure tailing me didn't help. Fedora low, collar up, gone before I could get a good look. Back at the brownstone, Nero Wolfe had been his usual cryptic self. Sipping Remmer's beer and muttering about tunnels being the artery of the crime had sent me back to Margaret Klein, the librarian who'd given Vance that 1910 blueprint. Her jumpy act yesterday, plus that VH note under her blotter, had my radar pinging. If she was hiding something, I was going to shake it loose. Inside the library, the air was cool and heavy with the smell of old paper and polished wood. The marble halls echoed with the soft shuffle of footsteps and the occasional cough of a scholar buried in books. I headed straight for the map division, where I'd found Margaret Klein pronounced Klein yesterday, sorting maps like her life depended on it. Today, she was at the same counter, but her hands weren't as steady, and her glasses kept sliding down her nose. She looked up as I approached, and her eyes widened like a deer spotting a hunter. "Mr. Goodwin," she said, her voice a notch too high. "Back so soon? Did you find something about Leonard?" I leaned on the counter, keeping my smile easy. "Maybe, Miss Klein. Tying up loose ends. That blueprint you gave Vance, it's a beaut, showed a tunnel under Grand Central, sealed since 22. But you said Vance thought it was active again. Care to elaborate? What was he chasing down there?" She fumbled with a stack of maps, dropping one that fluttered to the floor. I bent to pick it up, noticing a faint pencil mark in the corner. B7, 10, 10. The same tunnel designation from the blueprint dated 4 days ago. "Interesting," I handed it back, watching her face. "Careful," I said. "Those maps look important." "They're just old records," she stammered, tucking the map away. "Leonard was obsessed with that tunnel. He thought it was being used for something illegal. Smuggling, maybe. He didn't say what I just gave him the blueprint and some articles. That's all I know." Her eyes wouldn't meet mine, and that VH note was still nagging me. "You sure?" I pressed. Vance mentioned a few names. Vincent Harlow, Dr. Samuel Trent. Ring any bells? Or maybe VH does? Her face went pale, and her fingers clutched the counter. "I don't know any Harlow," she said, too fast. "Or Trent Leonard never mentioned them. I'm just a librarian, Mr. Goodwin. I help with research, not. Whatever this is, I didn't buy it." Her nerves were screaming louder than a Times. "Square newsboy." "One more thing," I said, lowering my voice. "That blueprint. Any chance someone else asked for it recently? Say, someone with a pencil mustache and a nightclub?" She shook her head, but her hands betrayed her, trembling as she adjusted her glasses. "No one," she said. "Just Leonard. Please, I have work to do." I nodded, stepping back. Pushing her now would only clamber up tighter. "Thanks, Miss Klein. I'll be in touch." I turned to leave, but not before slipping into the reading room where she'd shown me the blueprint yesterday. The drawer was locked now, but a paperclip and a little finesse got it open. Inside, I found a note tucked among the maps, in the same scrawl as the VH slip. "Meet at B7, midnight, 10:12. The night before Vance's murder jackpot, or a trap." Back at the brownstone by noon, I found Wolfe in the office, his massive frame sunk into his custom chair, a fresh beer bottle sweating on the desk. The room smelled of leather, ink, and the faint orchid scent that clung to him like a signature Fritz was humming in the kitchen, prepping a lunch of veal cutlets that made my stomach growl. I dropped my notebook on the desk and laid out the morning's haul, Klein's jitters, the marked map, and the midnight meeting note. Wolfe's eyes gleamed as he studied the note, which he'd slipped into my pocket before leaving the library. "Intriguing," he murmured, his voice a low rumble. "A meeting at the tunnel, hours before Mr. Vance's death. Miss Klein is more than a bystander, Archie." "She is involved, wittingly or not. Think she's working with Harlow?" I asked, picturing that slick nightclub owner. That VH could be him, and she clammed up when I mentioned his name. "Possibly," Wolfe said, sipping his beer. "But the initials may be a diversion. We need more. Dr. Trent is next. His knowledge of the city's underground may clarify this labyrinth. And Archie, that shadow you saw, assume it is no coincidence you are being watched." He wasn't wrong. As he'd left the library, he'd spotted that figure again. Fedora low, standing across Fifth Avenue, half hidden by a newsstand. I'd tried to tail them, but they melted into the crowd like smoke. Whoever they were, they knew how to move, and they were sticking to me like glue. Was it Klein, covering her tracks? Harlow, keeping tabs? Or someone new, pulling strings we hadn't seen? I checked my watch. 12:30 Trent's office at Columbia was my next stop. But first, I needed to call Kramer. If that notebook from Vance's pocket had more clues, I wanted them. Now I dialed homicide, and Kramer's growl answered on the second ring. Goodwin, this better be good. I'm buried in paperwork. Notebook pages, Inspector, I said. You promised. Got anything yet? He grumbled, but I heard papers shuffling. Just sent a copy to your office. It's mostly gibberish. Names, sketches, something about B7. You and Wolfe better not be wasting my time. B7, I said, my pulse quickening. That's the tunnel. Anything else? Not your maid, Goodwin, he snapped. Read it yourself. The line went dead as due. Notebook pages arrived an hour later, delivered by a surly cop who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. I spread them on my desk. Vance's handwriting, cramped and urgent, listed Harlow, Klein and Trent, plus a rough sketch of the B7 tunnel, with an X marked at a junction. A single line stood out. VH knows the truth, Harlow again, or a red herring to throw us off. Wolfe scanned the pages, his lips pursed. Archie, he said, this meeting note and Vance's scribbles suggest a conspiracy. The tunnel is not just a passage, it's a purpose. Find Dr. Trent, press him hard, and watch your back. Chapter 6, The Professor's Obsession. It was 2 p.m. on October 14th, 1945, and Columbia University's campus was a sprawl of ivy-covered buildings under a grey sky that threatened more rain. They'd left the brownstone after lunch. Fritz veal cutlets, crisp and golden, were almost enough to make me forget the case for 10 minutes. Almost Nero Wolfe had been in the office, parked behind his cherrywood desk, poring over the copied pages of Leonard Vance's notebook, his fingers laced over his ample stomach. The notebook, sent over by Inspector Kramer, was a goldmine of scribbles. Names: Vincent Harlow, Harlow, Margaret Klein, Klein, Dr. Samuel Trent, Trent, a sketch of the B7 tunnel, and that line, VH knows the truth. The note he'd swiped from Klein's desk, marked meet at B7, midnight 10:12, was burning a hole in my pocket. A meeting hours before Vance's murder? That wasn't coincidence. It was a clue Wolfe had been clear. Dr. Samuel Trent, a history professor obsessed with New York's underground, was my next stop. Archie, he'd rumbled, sipping a Remmer's beer. Mr. Trent's knowledge may unlock this labyrinth. Press him on the tunnel's history and its present use, and be wary of that shadow following you. They are persistent. He'd seen that shadow again, leaving the library, fedora low, collar up, slipping into an alley before I could close the gap. Whoever they were good, and I was getting tired of playing cat and mouse. Now, as I crossed the Columbia campus, my eyes scanned the crowds, students with armfuls of books, professors in tweed, a janitor sweeping leaves. No fedora yet, but my neck was prickling. Trent's office was in Low Memorial Library, a grand dome of a building that felt like a cathedral for eggheads. I climbed the steps, my overcoat flapping in the breeze, and navigated a maze of hallways to his door, marked Dr. Samuel Trent, History Department. I knocked, and a voice, sharp, impatient, called Enter. Inside, the office was a cluttered cave of books, maps, and subway tokens scattered like loose change. Dr. Samuel Trent pronounced Trent was a wiry man in his 50s, with greying hair and eyes that gleamed like he'd just found a buried treasure. He was hunched over a desk piled with papers, a magnifying glass in one hand, a pencil in the other. Yes, he snapped, barely looking up. Busy Archie Goodwin working for Nero Wolfe, I said, tipping my hat. Got a minute to talk about Leonard. Vance? Trent's pencil stopped mid-scribble, and his eyes flicked to mine, wary as a cornered rat. Vance? The detective? I heard he was killed. Tragic. What's this about? I leaned against a bookshelf, keeping my tone light. Vance was poking around old tunnels under the city. His sister says you helped him. Gave him some history on the subway's underbelly. Care to fill me in? Trent set down the magnifying glass, his fingers twitching. I met Vance a month ago, he said. His voice clipped, like he was lecturing a slow student. He was researching abandoned subway tunnels, specifically a maintenance shaft under Grand Central, B7, sealed in the 1920s, I gave him a monograph I wrote on the city's underground infrastructure. Fascinating stuff, built for transit, used for crime during Prohibition bootleggers. You know, loved those tunnels. Crime? I raised an eyebrow. Vance thought that tunnel was back in business. Smuggling, maybe. You hear anything about that? Trent's eyes darted to a stack of papers, then back to me. Ridiculous, he said, but his voice cracked. Those tunnels are relics, bricked up, forgotten. Vance was chasing shadows. I told him as much. I didn't buy it. His nerves were louder than a jackhammer. He mentioned anyone else? Vincent Harlow, maybe? Margaret Klein? No, Trent said, too fast. He worked alone. Look, I'm a scholar, not a detective. I gave him my research, that's all. He stood, shuffling papers like he was hiding something. I have a lecture soon. If that's all. One more thing, I said, stepping closer. You ever visit that tunnel yourself? For academic curiosity? Trent froze, his face paling. Of course not, he snapped. It's sealed dangerous. I study history, not holes in the ground. But his hands were shaking and a photo slipped from his desk. A grainy shot of a bricked-up tunnel entrance. Dust disturbed, scratches fresh on the wall. It matched the B7 blueprint. Nice picture, I said, picking it up. Mind if I borrow this? Trent snatched it back, his eyes blazing. That's private research. Leave it alone. Goodwin? I smiled, but my gut was buzzing. Trent knew more than he was letting on. Maybe a lot more. I left his office. The photo's image burned in my mind. Outside, the campus was quieter now. Students trickling away. I checked my watch. 3:30. Time to report to Wolfe, but first I needed to shake that shadow. As I crossed the quad, I caught it again. Fedora low, standing by a lamppost, watching. I doubled back, weaving through a crowd, but they were gone. Again, back at the brownstone by 4, I found Wolfe in the office, his massive frame sunk into his chair, a fresh beer bottle sweating on the desk. The room smelled of leather, ink, and the faint orchid scent that followed him everywhere. Fritz was in the kitchen, prepping dinner. Roast duck. If my nose was right, I tossed my hat on the rack and laid out Trent's story. His monograph, his denial, the photo, and those shaky hands. Wolfe's eyes gleamed as he leaned back, the chair creaking. Intriguing, he murmured. Dr. Trent's. Agitation suggests complicity. That photograph. Recent disturbances in a sealed tunnel. He's not merely a scholar, Archie. He is involved. Think he's tied to Klein? I asked. Or Harlow? That VH note could point anywhere. Possibly, Wolfe said, sipping his beer. The tunnel is the pivot. Its use, past or present, holds the motive for Mr. Vance's murder returned to Grand Central tomorrow. Find that tunnel entrance and Archie, do not let that shadow surprise you. I nodded, but my mind was racing. Trent's photo, Klein's note, Harlow's trap door. They were pieces of the same puzzle, but the picture was still blurry. And that shadow? They were getting bolder, and I didn't like it. Before turning in, I checked the brownstone's windows. West 35th Street was dark, but a faint cigarette glow flickered across the street. Same fedora, same stance. Whoever they weren't quitting. Chapter 7. The Tunnel Revealed. It was 9 a.m. on October 15th, 1945, and Grand Central Terminal buzzed above ground like a beehive. Commuters rushing, vendors shouting, the massive clock ticking over the information booth. But I wasn't here for the glamour Nero Wolfe's orders rang in my ears as it left the brownstone after breakfast. Fritz scrambled eggs with truffles, a rare treat that almost dulled the edge of what lay ahead. Wolfe had been in the office, his 300-pound frame wedged into his custom chair, poring over Trent's photo and Vance's notebook sketches. The pieces were lining up. Klein's midnight meeting note at B7, Harlow's trap door, Trent's disturbed tunnel photo, and that persistent shadow Archie, Wolfe had rumbled. Downing a Remmers beer, the tunnel is the revelation, enter it, document everything, but do not go alone, or unarmed. I wasn't alone. I had my .32 Colt in my shoulder holster, and a janitor's key had borrowed from Kramer's report contacts for a 5-spot. The storage room where Vance died was in the basement level, past freight elevators and locked gates. I flashed a fake maintenance badge at a guard, slipped through, and found the door. Heavy steel marked authorized personnel only. The key turned with a groan, and I stepped into darkness that smelled of dust, oil, and something metallic. Blood. The room was cramped, stacked with wooden crates stamped surplus war materials, their shadows dancing in my flashlight beam. Vance's body had been here, stabbed clean through the chest. No struggle, I scanned the floor. Scuff marks leading to a far wall, crates pushed aside like they'd been moved recently. Heart pounding, I shoved them, revealing it. A rusted iron door, half hidden, its hinges scarred with fresh scratches matching Trent's photo B7. The tunnel eye hesitated. Wolfe's warning echoed, but curiosity won. The door creaked open on protesting hinges, revealing a black moor sloping downward. Cool air rushed out, carrying echoes of dripping water and voices. No, just the subway's distant roar I stepped in, flashlight cutting the gloom. The passage was narrow, 6 feet high, brick-lined walls, slick with moisture, rails rusted underfoot, remnants of an old handcar track 50 feet in. The beam caught something, a cigarette butt stamped with the blue orchid logo, Harlow Gotcha. Deeper still, the tunnel widened into a junction, left to the subway mains, right into blackness. Vance's Notebook X marked this spot. I followed right, walls giving way to rough stone, the air growing mustier. Then a glint, a small crate, half buried in gravel, lid ajar inside. Old letters, yellowed photos of city officials in compromising poses, blackmail material, and scrawled on one, VH pays up, 10-12, the meeting night jackpot. But as I pocketed a sample photo, footsteps echoed behind me. Crunch, crunch. Not the subway. I killed the light, pressed against the wall, Colt drawn. A figure emerged, fedora low, flashlight sweeping the shadow. They paused, beam inches from my hiding spot. Goodwin? A muffled voice hissed. Male? Female? I lunged, tackling them to the ground. We rolled, flashlight shattering, fists flying. I pinned them, ripping off the fedora, blonde hair tumbled out. Not Klein, not a man. A new player. They kneed me, scrambled free and bolted. I fired a warning shot. Bang! Echoing like thunder, footsteps faded. I chased, but the tunnel forked and they were gone. Backtracking, I emerged sweating, crate sample in hand, orchid butt in my pocket. That tussle, red herring or real threat. Back at the brownstone by noon, the office was a sanctuary. Leather chairs, bookshelves, the faint orchid scent cutting the tunnel's grime. Wolfe was waiting, beer in hand, eyes sharp. Fritz brought coffee, strong and black. I dumped the haul on the desk. Cigarette butt, photo, letters. Boss, I gasped. The tunnels live. Blackmail stash, city bigwigs, Harlow's mark all over it. And that shadow. A blonde fought like a wildcat. Wolfe examined the items with a jeweller's eye, lips pursed. Fooey, he grunted. Not smuggling. Archie, extortion. Mr. Vance stumbled on this cash. The meeting note was a trap. VH, Vincent Harlow, lured him, stabbed him to silence him. Klein supplied blueprints. Trent located the entrance for a cut. The shadow? Likely Harlow's enforcer, a woman to throw us off. I whistled Klein and Trent in on it. And that tussle meant to scare me off. Precisely, Wolfe said, chair creaking as he leaned back. The tunnel reveals the motive. Greed, power. But we need proof. Summon them all, tonight. And Archie, call Kramer. This ends in my office. I dialed homicide, Kramer's growl answering. Goodwin? What now? Inspector, I said. Get your boys. We've cracked it. Tunnel blackmail ring, Harlow's the killer. Bring Klein. Trent Wolfe wants a showdown at 8. Kramer barked a laugh. You better be right, or Wolfe's orchids are evidence. Click by 7. The brownstone hummed. I checked the windows. No shadow. Yet Chapter 8. The red herrings pile up. It was 6 p.m. on October 15th, 1945, and the brownstone on West 35th Street was a fortress of tension. Fritz Brenner was in the kitchen, his roast duck sending aromas that could have distracted me if my mind wasn't on the case. Nero Wolfe sat behind his cherrywood desk, 300 pounds of him, a bottle of Remmer's beer sweating in his hand, his eyes scanning the blackmail letters he'd pulled from the tunnel, photos of city officials in compromising spots scrawled with VH pays up. 10-12 the blue orchid cigarette butt lay beside them, pointing straight at Vincent Harlow. My tussle with the blonde shadow in the tunnel had my ribs aching. But Wolfe's theory, Harlow as the killer, Klein and Trent as accomplices, was coming together. Tonight, he wanted them all here for a showdown. But the day wasn't done throwing curveballs. He'd called Inspector Kramer at noon, telling him to round up Vincent Harlow, Margaret Klein, and Dr. Samuel Trent for an 8 o'clock meeting. Kramer had grumbled but agreed, his voice thick with scepticism. Goodwin, if Wolfe's wrong, he'll have his orchids for lunch, he'd snapped before hanging up. Now I was pacing the office, the smell of leather, ink and orchids grounding me as I pieced together the day's haul. Klein's nervous dodge, Trent's shaky denial, Harlow's slick lies, and that blonde who fought like a pro. Too many threads, and I didn't trust any of them. At 6:30, the phone rang, shattering the quiet. I grabbed it, expecting Kramer. Instead, it was Eleanor Vance, her voice high and frantic. "Mr. Goodwin, someone broke into my apartment. They tore through Leonard's files, left a note. Stop digging, or you're next him at a hotel now, but I'm scared. Stay put, Miss Vance," I said, my pulse spiking. "Give me the hotel name. They'll send a cop to watch you." She whispered the address, Hotel Astor, and I jotted it down. "Don't move until I call Wolfe's got this." I hung up, turning to Wolfe, who was eyeing a photo of a city councilman in a compromising embrace. "Eleanor's in trouble," I said, break-in, threatening note sound like Harlow's trying to shut her up. Wolfe grunted, a sound like a bear waking up. "Possibly, or a diversion. Someone wants us distracted. Call Kramer, ensure Miss Vance's safety, then prepare the office for our guests." I dialed Kramer, who was already en route with the suspects. "Eleanor Vance got a threat," I told him. "She's at the Astor. Send a man pronto." "Another mess?" Kramer growled. "Fine, they'll handle it. Be there at 8. Don't make me regret this." Goodwin click. I checked the office. Yellow leather chair for Kramer, 3 more for the suspects, a tray of Fritz coffee and pastries ready. The blackmail letters and cigarette butt were locked in Wolfe's safe, but I kept the tunnel photo on me, its scratched bricks nagging at my brain. That blonde shadow, was she Harlow's muscle, or something else? And why target Eleanor now? At 8 sharp, the doorbell jangled, and I opened it to a grim-faced Kramer, his unlit cigar chewed to a stub. Behind him were Harlow, Klein and Trent, each looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. Harlow, slick as ever in a tailored suit, flashed a grin that didn't reach his. Eyes Klein, glasses slipping, clutched her purse like a shield. Trent, wiry and twitchy, kept glancing at the door like he might bolt. I ushered them into the office, where Wolfe sat like a king, his massive frame filling the room, a fresh beer in hand. "Sit," Wolfe said, his voice a low rumble. "Inspector Kramer, thank you for your cooperation. We are here to discuss the murder of Leonard Vance and the conspiracy surrounding it." Kramer sank into the yellow chair, glaring. "This better be good, Wolfe." "My men are stretched thin." Harlow leaned back, crossing his legs. "What's this about, Wolfe? I run a clean club. Vance was a pest, sure, but I didn't kill him." Klein's voice trembled. "I only helped with research. I didn't know he'd die." Trent just stared at the floor, silent. I stood by the desk, watching their faces. Wolfe set down his beer, his eyes narrowing. "Mr. Vance was killed to protect a secret. A blackmail operation run through a tunnel under Grand Central. Mr. Harlow, your cigarette butt was found there, Miss Klein. You provided the blueprints, Dr. Trent. You pinpointed the entrance. Each of you played a role." Harlow laughed, sharp and hollow. "A cigarette? That's your evidence?" "I smoke at the club, not in some filthy tunnel," Klein gasped, her glasses nearly falling. "I didn't know what Leonard wanted. I just gave him maps." Trent finally spoke, his voice shrill. "I'm a historian, not a criminal. I told Vance about the tunnel's history, nothing more." Kramer's cigar twitched. "Wolfe, you got proof, or just talk?" Wolfe leaned forward, the chair creaking. "Proof is forthcoming, Inspector." But consider, a meeting was arranged in the tunnel. Midnight, October the 12th, Mr. Vance attended, and died. The note, found by Archie, points to VH Mr. Harlow. Care to explain? Harlow's grin faltered, but he recovered. "No idea. Could be anyone. Victor Hammond, Vera Holt. You're fishing, Wolfe." I caught Klein's flinch at Vera Holt. A name? A bluff? Red herring or lead? I filed it away. Then the phone rang again. Eleanor, her voice near hysterics. "Mr. Goodwin, someone's outside my hotel room. I hear footsteps. Stay calm, I said, heart racing. Lock the door. Cops are coming. I hung up, turning to Wolf Eleanor's in danger. Now Wolf's eyes flicked to Harlow, then back to me. Archie, go to her inspector. Send your men. This escalation confirms our path. The killer is desperate. I grabbed my coat, Colt 32 still holstered, and bolted out, Kramer barking orders into his radio. As I hit the street, I scanned for the shadow. No fedora, but a blonde woman lingered across the street, her face half hidden by a scarf. The same one from the tunnel. I didn't wait to find out, hailing a cab to the Astor. At the hotel, I found Eleanor's safe, a cop posted outside her room. The footsteps? Gone? A false alarm? Or another warning? Back at the brownstone by 10, the suspects were gone. Kramer fuming Wolf's playing games, he growled. No arrests yet, but in watching them. Wolf, sipping beer, was unfazed. Archie, the net is closing. Tomorrow we end this prepare for the Revelation Chapter 9, the climactic revelation. Quick question. If you were exposing a killer in your city, what's the one clue you'd bet it all on? A note, a witness, a hunch. Drop it in the comments, along with your city and time zone. Maybe you'll outsmart Wolf Reddy. Let's end this. It was 8 p.m. on October 16th, 1945, and the brownstone on West 35th Street was a pressure cooker. Fritz Brenner had outdone himself. Roast lamb, rosemary-scented, wafted from the kitchen, but nobody was eating tonight. The office was set for war. Nero Wolfe behind his cherrywood desk, 300 pounds of him, a Remmer's beer untouched, his eyes sharp as a hawk's. The blackmail letters, the blue orchid cigarette butt and Trent's tunnel photo sat in the safe, but he'd laid out copies on the desk, props for the show. The yellow leather chair was for Inspector Kramer, 3 more for Vincent Harlow, H.R. Lowe, Margaret Klein, and Dr. Samuel Trent. Eleanor Vance was safe at the Hotel Astor, a cop posted outside, but her frantic call last night, "Stop digging or you're next," hung heavy. That blonde shadow, still out there, and I was itching to pin her. The doorbell jangled, and I let in Kramer, his face redder than a fire truck, cigar chewed to a nub. Behind him shuffled Harlow, slick in a pinstripe suit, Klein, glasses fogging with nerves, and Trent twitchy as a squirrel. They filed into the office, each taking a chair, the air thick with suspicion and the faint orchid scent that clung to Wolf. Kramer dropped into the yellow chair, growling, "Wolf, this better be worth my time. My men are babysitting your suspects and am out of patience." Wolf leaned back, the chair creaking under his bulk. "Inspector," he rumbled, "patience is unnecessary. Tonight, we expose a murderer." Mr. Vance's death was no robbery. It was a calculated act to protect a blackmail ring operating through a tunnel under Grand Central. Each of you, his eyes swept the room, played a role. Harlow smirked, crossing his arms. "You're dreaming, Wolf. I run a club, not a crime syndicate." Klein clutched her purse, whispering, "I didn't know he'd die!" Trent stared at the floor, muttering, "This is absurd." I stood by the desk, watching their faces like a card player spotting tells. Wolf sipped his beer, a rare pause, then set it down. "Let us begin with the facts. Mr. Vance was investigating a tunnel, B7, sealed since 1922, reopened for nefarious purposes. Archie found a crate of letters and photos, blackmail material targeting city officials. A cigarette butt stamped the Blue Orchid was found in the tunnel. A note, meet at B7, midnight 10:12, lured Mr. Vance to his death. And a photograph, Dr. Trent, from your desk, shows fresh scratches on the tunnel entrance. Trent's head snapped up. That's research. I didn't... Wolf raised a hand, silencing him. "Miss Klein, you provided the 1910 blueprint that guided Mr. Vance to B7. Your note, VH pays up, implicates Mr. Harlow. And you, Mr. Harlow, used your nightclub as a front, storing evidence in the tunnel, accessed via a trapdoor in your club." Harlow laughed, sharp and cold. "You've got nothing but a cigarette and a hunch that trapdoors for liquor, not secrets. And VH could be anybody. Vera Holt, my singer." "Ask her." Klein gasped, her glasses slipping. "I didn't write that note, I swear." Trent's hands shook, his eyes darting to Harlow. I caught that Vera Holt name again, Harlow's deflection from last night. Was she the blonde shadow? I leaned in, voice low. Vera Holt, huh? Funny how she keeps coming up. Maybe we should invite her to this party. Kramer's cigar twitched Wolfe. Cut to it. Who's the killer? Wolfe's eyes gleamed, his voice dropping to a velvet growl. Mr. Harlow, you are the linchpin. You ran the blackmail operation, using the tunnel to store evidence. Miss Klein, pressured by debts. Your brother's gambling, perhaps, supplied the blueprints, believing it was research Dr. Trent, greedy for academic glory, located the tunnel entrance demanding a cut. When Mr. Vance got too close, you, Mr. Harlow, arranged the midnight meeting. You stabbed him in the storage room, locked it, and fled through the tunnel, leaving your cigarette as your undoing. Harlow bolted from his chair, lunging for the door. I was faster, tackling him to the floor, my knee pinning his chest. Going somewhere, I said, twisting his arm. Kramer's men rushed in, cuffs snapping on Harlow's wrists. Klein sobbed, spilling it all. Harlow threatened my brother. I had to help. Trent, pale, stammered. I only wanted the tunnel's history. I didn't know he'd kill. Kramer stood, cigar dangling. Wolfe, you got your man. But I'm taking Klein and Trent for questioning. This ain't over. He hauled them out. Harlow cursing, Klein weeping, Trent silent. I caught my breath, brushing dust off my suit. Wolfe leaned back, satisfied, but his eyes were still sharp. Archie, he said, the blonde shadow remains Vera Holt, perhaps. Find her. She may be Harlow's enforcer, or more. I nodded, but a chill hit me. Eleanor's threat, the blonde in the tunnel, Vera Holt's name circling like a vulture. Something didn't add up. Was Harlow the whole story, or just the fall guy? I checked my watch. 9:30. Time to track this Vera Holt, starting at the Blue Orchid. I hit the club by 10, the neon sign buzzing, the jazz quartet in full swing. The singer, red gown, blonde hair, had to be Vera. I cornered her backstage, her eyes cool as ice. Vera Holt? I said Archie Goodwin for Nero Wolfe. Know anything about a tunnel under Grand Central? Her laugh was sharp. Harlow's in trouble, huh? I just sing, Mr. Tunnels? That's his game. But her fingers twitched, and I spotted a blonde wig in her dressing room. The shadow. Or another trick. Back at the brownstone by 11, Wolfe was still up. A rare late night, I reported Vera's dodge and the wig. He grunted, sipping beer. Archie, the case is solved, but the shadow lingers. Tomorrow, confirm Miss Holt's role. We may have missed a thread. Chapter 10. Justice and Reflections. One last question. If you solved a crime in your city, what's the one thing you do to celebrate? Hit a bar, take a walk, or just sleep? Drop it in the comments, along with your city and time zone. Maybe you'll outshine Wolfe yet ready. Let's finish this. It was 10 a.m. on October 17th, 1945, and the brownstone on West 35th Street felt like a fortress after a siege. Fritz Brenner was in the kitchen, his coffee brewing with a rich aroma that cut through the lingering tension of last night's showdown. Nero Wolfe sat behind his cherrywood desk, all 300 pounds of him, a bottle of Remmer's beer in hand, its amber glow catching the morning light. The office smelled of leather, ink, and the faint orchid scent that clung to Wolfe. A reminder of his rooftop sanctuary. I was at my desk, typing up notes from the chaos. Vincent Harlow cuffed, Margaret Klein sobbing her confession, Dr. Samuel Trent mumbling about academic ruin, and Inspector Kramer hauling them off, but Vera Holt, the nightclub singer, and that blonde shadow from the tunnel? They were loose ends, and Wolfe wasn't one for frayed edges. Last night's confrontation had cracked the case wide open. Harlow, the slick owner of the Blue Orchid, pronounced Harlow, was running a blackmail ring, using the B7 tunnel under Grand Central to stash letters and photos of city officials in compromising spots. Klein Carline, the librarian, had supplied the 1910 blueprint. Coerced by Harlow's threats against her gambling addict brother Trent, the professor had pinpointed the tunnel entrance, lured by dreams of academic glory. When Leonard Vance got too close, Harlow lured him to a midnight meeting on October 12th and stabbed him in the storage room, locking it to stage a robbery. The cigarette butt stamped the Blue Orchid, the VH pays-up note, and Trent's photo of the scratched tunnel entrance had sealed Harlow's fate. but Vera Holt's name and that blonde who'd fought me in the tunnel kept nagging at me. I leaned back, stretching my bruised ribs from that tunnel. Scuffle. "Boss," I said. "Harlow's done. Klein and Trent are talking, but Vera Holt's still a ghost. I saw that blonde wig in her dressing room last night. Think she's the shadow?" Wolfe sipped his beer, eyes half closed. "Miss Holt is a complication," he rumbled. "Her role, enforcer, accomplice, or bystander, remains unclear. Visit her again, Archie, and check on Miss Vance. Her safety is paramount and her fear may reveal more." I nodded, grabbing my fedora. Eleanor Vance was still at the Hotel Astor, under police watch after that threatening note. "Stop digging, or you're next," I called Kramer first, catching him at homicide. His voice was gravelly, tired Goodwin, Harlow's in lockup singing like a canary, Klein's copping to accessory, Trent's claiming ignorance. "What do you want now?" "Vera Holt," I said. "She's the singer at Harlow's club. I need her address." "And how's Eleanor Vance holding up?" Kramer grunted. "Vance is fine. Cop's still with her. Holt lives at 23rd, and Lex, apartment 4B. Don't stir up more trouble." Goodwin click. By 11, I was at Vera Holt's apartment. A modest walk-up with peeling paint and a mailbox labelled V. Holt. I knocked. My .32 Colt snug in its holster, just in case the door cracked open, revealing Vera. Blonde hair, sharp cheekbones, eyes like a cat sizing up a mouse. She wore a silk robe, a cigarette dangling from her lips. "Mr. Goodwin," she drawled, exhaling smoke. "Harlow's in jail and you're still sniffing around? Persistent, aren't you?" "Comes with the job," I said, stepping inside. Her place was small but sharp. Red curtains, a record player spinning Billie Holiday, a blonde wig tossed on a chair. "That wig," I said, nodding at it. "Reminds me of a dame who jumped me in a tunnel." "Care to explain?" Vera laughed, low and throaty. "You think him your shadow? I'm a singer, not a thug." "Harlow ran his schemes, sure, but I just performed. If I wore a wig, it's for the stage, not sneaking around tunnels." Her eyes were too steady, her voice too smooth. I spotted a photo on her table, her and Harlow, cozy, dated a year back. "Close with Harlow, huh?" I pressed no about his blackmail stash. She stubbed out her cigarette, her fingers steady now. "Harlow talked big, but I stayed out of it. If you're looking for his muscle, try his bouncer, Eddie Big Guy, blonde crew cut." "Wears a hat to look tough, Eddie. A blonde bouncer could pass for a woman in the dark." A red herring or the truth. I filed it away and left, her laugh trailing me out the door. By noon, I was at the Hotel Astor, where Eleanor Vance waited in a modest room, a cop outside. She looked pale, her mink coat draped over a chair, but her eyes were steady. "Mr. Goodwin," she said, voice soft. "Is it over? Did you find Leonard's killer?" "Harlow's in cuffs," I said, sitting across from her. "Klein and Trent helped, but he swung the knife. We're tying up loose ends. That note, stop digging. Any idea who sent it?" She shook her head, fingers twisting a handkerchief. "No, but Leonard had enemies. He mentioned a woman once, someone he didn't trust blonde. He said, I thought he meant a client." "Blonde again? Vera? Eddie? Or someone else?" I left Eleanor with a promise to keep her safe and headed back to the brownstone, my mind spinning. By 2 p.m. I was back in the office. Wolfe still at his desk, a fresh beer in hand. I laid out Vera's story, the wig, the bouncer, and Eleanor's hint Vera's slippery, I said. Could be the shadow, but this Eddie angle's new. And Eleanor's blonde mystery woman? Another player? Wolfe leaned back, chair creaking. "Archie, the case is resolved. Harlow killed Mr. Vance to protect his blackmail. Miss Klein and Dr. Trent were complicit, driven by fear and greed. Miss Holt is a peripheral figure, likely a distraction. The shadow, if Eddie, was Harlow's enforcer. The tunnel is sealed. Justice served." I frowned. What about Eleanor's enemies? And that note? Wolfe's lips twitched, almost a smile. "Miss Vance's fear is natural. The note was Harlow's last attempt to silence her. The world, Archie, is full of tunnels. People hide in them. Always let this one rest." "Was right," Kramer called later, confirming Harlow's confession. He'd stabbed Vance, used the tunnel for blackmail, coerced Klein, and Trent. Vera was cleared, just a singer with a sharp tongue. Eddie, the bouncer, admitted to tailing me. Harlow's orders, no blonde wig needed, Eleanor sent a check. generous enough to make Wolfe smile, and Kramer grudgingly thanked us. The tunnel was bricked up again, its secrets buried. I leaned back, the office quiet now, just the tick of the clock, and Fritz humming in the kitchen. "Case closed, boss," I said. "But those tunnels, they give me the creeps." Wolfe sipped his beer, eyes gleaming. "They should, Archie. They always will."